morning, children. So, today we are going to start with Expert Detectives, that is chapter number 6. Nishant, a boy of 7, also called 7 because his name means seventh note of the musical scale, and his 10-year-old sister Maya are very curious about one Mr. Nath. Then, one day, the children's marble rolls into Mr. Nath's room and Nishant gets a chance to see him. Is he a crook on the run? Why is his face badly scared? Why has he no friends? Nishant's mother, a doctor, knows Mr. Nath as a patient who's very polite. So, this lesson is a story of two young detectives, Nishant and Maya, who were inquisitive about a man who was polite and a recluse with health problems. Nishant's mother, a doctor by profession, knew the man as a patient. They persistently searched for evidence against him. However, these were more imaginary than incriminating. Their deduction, curiosity is obvious in the acts. The narrator recounts the early childhood days of her. So, let's start with this chapter. As we walked back towards the clinic, Seven said, "He doesn't look anything like a monster, Maya. But did you see how thin he is? Maybe he's very poor and can't afford to eat." "He can't be poor if he's a crook on the run," I told him. "He's probably got millions of rupees stashed away somewhere in that room." "Do you really think he's a criminal, Maya?" "He doesn't look like one." Nishant looked doubtful. "Of course he's one." "Seven," I said, "and he certainly isn't starving. Mr. Mehta told us that Ramesh brings his meals up from the restaurant downstairs." This is basically a conversation between Maya and Nishad. So the narrator of the story is Maya. Maya is writing about the incidents which took place, the conversation with her brother, and what all incidents which were there in the story. So opening lines, they are the conversation between Maya and Seven. Seven's real name was Nishad and was 7 years old, whereas Maya was a 10 years old girl. There lived a person with suspicious activities. So, but Maya, Mr. Mehta told us he doesn't work anywhere. So how can he possibly have money to pay for food? Nishad said. Exactly, I exclaimed. He must have lots of money hidden somewhere. Maybe in that trunk in his room. It's probably full of silver and gold and jewels and... What rubbish! Nishad interrupted. "I know I am right, stupid," I told him. "By the way, Seven, did you see his scars?" "I couldn't. It was too dark. But I bet he got them during a shootout with the police or something." "Mummy told us quite clearly they were burn scars," Nishad said firmly. "Perhaps the police had to set his house on fire to force him out," I suggested. Seven looked unsure. On the Monday following Mama's birthday, Seven went alone with her to the clinic at Girgaon as I was spending the evening with a school friend. When they returned, Nishad told me he had been to see Mr. Nath, and I felt most annoyed that I hadn't been there. Seven had been quite upset about Mr. Nath's gaunt appearance and was sure that he was starving. He told me that he had knocked loudly on Mr. Nath's door that evening and said, "Open the door quickly, Mr. Nath." The man had opened it and asked him, Lost another marble? He had obviously recognized my brother. No, said Nishad. He had taken the man's hand as his own and thrust a bar of chocolate into it. Did you get a chance to peek into the trunk, Seven? I asked. Nishad looked disappointed. He didn't even ask me in, he said. Then he smiled. But I didn't find out something, Maya. I went down to the restaurant where Ramesh works and talked to him. Good for you, Mr. Detective, I said, patting him on the back. I hope you questioned him properly. Seven looked pleased. Ramesh told me that he takes 2 meals for Mr. Nath every morning and evening, and 2 cups of tea, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. Ramesh says he's not very particular about what he eats. It's always the same food, 2 chapatis, some dal, and a vegetable. Mr. Nath pays cash and tips well. Ramesh told me something very strange, Maya, Seven added. Almost every Sunday he carries 2 lunches to Mr. Nath's room, and the same man is with him each time. He's tall, fair, stout, and wears spectacles. Ramesh says his visitors talks a lot, unlike Mr. Nath who hardly speaks. Well done, Nishad, I told him. Now that we have made some progress with our inquiries, we'll have to sort out all the facts like expert detective so that we can trap the crook. How do you go on, Maya? Seven sighed. How can you possibly imagine he's a crook? He looks so ordinary. Criminals can look quite ordinary, smarty. I retorted. Did you see the pictures of the Hyderabadi housebreaker in the papers yesterday? He looked like any man on the street. Nishad looked doubtful. The monsoons broke the next day. Dark clouds accompanied by blinding flashes of lightning and roaring rolls of thunder burst with all their fury, flooding the streets with a heavy downpour. School was to have reopened after the summer holidays, but no traffic could move through the flooded roads, and there was an unexpected holiday. I thought I would spend the time usefully. I sat at my desk in our bedroom with a sheet of paper before me. So, children, today we'll do this first part, and what all is there in the first part. Let me explain you. See these opening lines, they are the conversation between Maya and Seven. Seven's real name, as you all know, it's Nishad. That is the seventh node of the musical note, and was 7 years old, whereas Maya, she was a 10-year-old girl. And there lived a person with suspicious activities, and his name was Mr. Nath. So these kids, they were curious to know about Mr. Nath. The person might be a poor or a crook on the run, because nobody knows whether he is poor or whether he is a crook or a criminal. Nishad was apprehensive, but for Maya, he was culprit. He must have hid the treasure. So they discussed about his food habits and his work, that what kind of things he used to have. Like there he they discussed that Ramesh, who was a waiter, he used to bring the same kind of food for him, where there are 2 chapatis, some dal and vegetable, and moreover Mr. Nath, he pays in cash. Nishad, he firmly told that the scars on his face were burn marks. So one day, Seven, that is Nishad, he visited Mr. Nath along with his mother, who was a doctor, and Maya went to spend time with her school friend. He was upset to see the ill health of Mr. Nath. So Nishad was very upset. In the evening, Seven knocked at his door and couldn't sneak peek into the trunk. Though he knocked at his door, but he was not able to see what is there in his trunk which was lying there. He gave him a chocolate bar. Then he went to Ramesh, who brought the meal from restaurant. This Nishad, he gave chocolate to the that man, Mr. Nath, and then he went to Ramesh, who was a waiter, and then he confirmed from him about the meals which he used to bring for Mr. Nath from the restaurant. He in turn informed about the routine and special demand for food on Sundays, as he had a visitor that day. And Ramesh, he told him that every Sunday this man, Mr. Nath, used to have a visitor. The same visitor used to visit his house, and on that day they are having two special lunches. Mr. Nath pays for the food, which includes chapatis, dal, and vegetables. Maya, she inquired with her detective instincts. She was arguing about the deceptive looks of the crook. The next day, because of the heavy rain, they had an unexpected break from the school. She sat down with a piece of paper and started writing the information that she has collected about him. Okay, so this was part 1. So there are 3 questions which you have to write. What did Nishad give Mr. Nath and why? So just now I have discussed with you what are the things that this Nishad he gave Mr. Nath, and what was the reason, if you remember. So answer is, Nishad gave Mr. Nath a bar of chocolate because he concluded from Mr. Nath's lean appearance, thin appearance, that he was starving, that he was not having money, he was very poor. So he gave a bar of chocolate to Mr. Nath. Second question is, what is strange about Mr. Nath's Sunday? What was a strange thing about that Sunday which Ramesh told him? So every Sunday, Mr. Nath used to have the same visitor at his home, and the two used to have lunch together. So that stranger as well as Mr. Nath, both of them used to have lunch together on every Sundays. Third question is, why did Nishad and Maya get a holiday? So what was the reason for the holiday? So it was raining heavily and the streets were flooded with the downpour because of the heavy rainfall. So the traffic was blocked and the children got a holiday because of all this. Because of that, the children, they got a holiday. So I hope this first part is clear to all of you. Take care.